Welcome to Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps, a bi-weekly podcast with me, Dr. Kish Price. Welcome back to Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps. I am Dr. Kish Price, and I am really excited to close out this series that we have been talking about regarding poverty pimping ain't easy. And this one specifically entitled Like a Pimp, because I think it makes sense for us to be aware of the profile, right? Like what are we looking for? What do we need to be on guard for? And if you've listened to the previous episodes, you probably have a good understanding of some of those things. But I thought it would be good to kind of close out by wrapping up some of the key factors of what a poverty pimp does, how they show up. And for those who may be joining us kind of in the middle of all of this, I am clarifying that we are not talking about poverty pimps in the aspect of, these political realms where it's used in a derogatory sense to call out true advocates for impoverished communities. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the dollars that are actually coming in to fund the people in the community, but those dollars are being reallocated for other purposes. So that's what this whole series has been about in regards to poverty pimping. So to kick us off, I guess I'll just start with saying a lot of it has to do with the profile of the person, right? There's a tactic to this, or there are tactics to this, but a lot of it has to do with the person and their character, right? And their ability to be in a place where they're okay with being controlling or being manipulative, trying to use psychological manipulation to get what they want out of the deal. And so when you think about how this shows up, it's not completely apparent. And that's why it does require asking questions. It requires you actually not just looking at what's being presented to you, but also kind of tracking, following the dollars, right? Figuring out what should be happening in a community and then what's actually happening in the community based on the funding that's coming into that particular community. Typically, this should be public facing information, especially when we're talking about city dollars, when we're talking about nonprofit organizations that are receiving funding. That should be public facing information. You should be able to see, like, what have they received? What was it allocated for? Did you actually see what it was supposed to be done? What was supposed to be done with the funding? What are the deliverables? Are we able to actually see the outcomes of what this funding was supposed to produce? And then here's the tricky part, is not just did you see the outcomes that were supposed to be produced, but you really should be gauging quantity and impact, quantity and quality, right? So not just we did it, we can point to that and say that thing was done, but was it executed in the way that it should have been executed? Was the funding for 500 people to receive support, but only 50 receive support? And if only 50 receive support, what happened with the rest of the funding? Was it reported back? Did it go back to the funder? Was it used for some other purpose? Those are the types of questions you should be asking, because otherwise you get down the road and you start, funders start asking questions like, well, what difference is our contributions actually making to really move the needle in these areas that we expect for it to move the needle? Like, if we are actually saying this funding is supposed to support kids in academic programs and their scores should reflect that, right? Their academic programming should show that there's some social, emotional, academic development that's happening that you can actually point to, right? And that is not just with a handful, it's for the amount of children that should have received that kind of support. And if not, that funding should go back and be reallocated to another purpose or another organization that is making impact. And that's where we kind of see the bottlenecking happening, right? Where there are certain typical players that may receive funding, but if you're not effective with that funding, then that should be it shouldn't be a hard thing, a difficult thing to say we tried and this didn't work. We didn't have the response we thought we were going to have, and we'd like to reallocate it for this purpose. And if the funder says, well, no, thank you very much, but we'd like to get the funding back because we want to reallocate it to this organization for this purpose. That's how it should work. What you typically see is that doesn't happen. You have a lot of organizations that won't report accurately. They will find another use for the funding. In fact, they may have had another use for the funding all along, and they feel like they can get over and bamboozle and reallocate how they want to. Well, that is not doing any of us any good because we're not able to actually see the impact of the investment, right? Once you can show that there is a true path to follow. There's impact at these different levels because this level of investment went into this programming, then that actually helps to build the case to continue to get more funding. So that is something to look for. I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know who's listening. I don't know if this is helping you in your realm, right? Because I'm talking more so from the city nonprofit space of being able to help communities better. But this may relate to somebody who's working in schools. It may help you if you're working at the state level. I don't know who I'm talking to be honest. And I do want to pause to actually say thank you to all of our listeners, especially those global listeners that we're up to 10 countries in terms of reach with the podcast now. So I'm sure there are other ways in which you can I guess apply this information. And I hope that is helpful. So number one, you're looking for the controlling and manipulation factor. Is that happening? How is that happening? Who is controlling? Who is manipulating? Sometimes it's not a person. There may be several people. It may be a department. The whole organization may have adopted this spirit of thinking it's okay to do whatever you want to do with the money that's coming in, which we have to hold people accountable because if it's not happening in the way that it should happen, that is why we're not seeing the needle move in the ways that we have hoped for so many years, right? You start looking back and you're like, why is it that this has been a pattern? Like, why has this happened for the past 10, 15, 20, 25 years? And we're not seeing gains in this area if this amount of funding went into this effort. That's not to say that the world should completely change, but you absolutely should see some kind of positive impact with investment if you know that there are certain things that work, right? We know that it works for you to invest in youth and youth opportunities. So why don't you see that? We know that it works to invest in education when people are trying to, purchase homes or financial education. We know that that helps. So is it helping? So those are the things to look at. And when we talk about control and manipulation and how it plays out, the other area is exploitation. Another big factor to consider. And when we're talking about that, is literally saying, is there a particular population that is vulnerable that someone with information could use that information in order to personally benefit? And if you go back to, I don't know which episode it was, and I don't know if it was maybe the first episode on poverty pimping, could have been the second, where I shared an example of an individual who's created his whole organization. I mean, his whole nonprofit is literally about that. Understanding that poor communities, impoverished communities, is somewhat of a what you would call money grab for him, right? He doesn't necessarily relate to the community. He doesn't understand the community. He doesn't want to understand the community, but he sees it as an opportunity to be able to get these grants that are available, get these dollars that are available to do the work. And I'm saying that with air quotes, in order to personally profit, right? So that's exploitation. That's more so I see a problem that I think I could benefit from. I'm not really interested in necessarily solving the problem, but I am going to show up at the table. I've got the means and capacity to build an organization that will seem respectable and seem like they're doing the work. But I really don't care about the population I'm working with. So that one's a little more difficult to gauge because it's more of a heart check. You're trying to get a sense of what the individual who's leading that organization or individuals that are leading that organization truly believe. Like, you know, not just what you say, but what you do, how you think, because that matters when you start talking about funding certain projects and considering them successful, and more money goes into a very bad system, if you will, right? It's not one that's trustworthy. And so that is something to consider. So we talk about control, manipulation, exploitation. The next big thing is intimidation, right? So sometimes that element of control and manipulation can be used as a road or a path into intimidation tactics, where, and I guess I should also say, I said the control and manipulation piece, but also that exploitation plays into it as well, where those individuals will begin to assert authority in spaces where they use their perceived power, right, to claim space, to really hold the space, to be territorial, as if they are the only ones who can solve the problem. Um, they're the only ones that can receive the funding because they are the only ones who can solve the problem without really having much proof, right? And hats off to those who have real proof, like real numbers, real data. They aren't fudging numbers. They aren't counting participants twice and three times and four times over. Like they're actually doing things in the right way, right? That is what you have a difficult time, I think, pinpointing, because you can lie about anything, right? And people know that, right? So these poverty pimps will do that. They will lie. They're okay with fudging numbers. They're okay with trying to make it seem as if the impact is greater than it is. Well, part of that territory is the intimidation factor. So it's to say, hey, little you, whether that's an individual or a smaller nonprofit or a, new nonprofit, you can't do what we've done because look at what we've done. Well, sometimes what's being presented, this is my point, when it's a poverty pimp involved, isn't actually what it is. And so just keep that in mind because that's something that you do want to check for. And hopefully, I'm talking to people who are funders. Hopefully, I'm talking to people who are actually in control of these dollars that are going into communities. Hopefully, I'm talking to constituents that are able to be able to call these things out and actually do some true fact checking to make sure that the dollars are going where they need to go. Hopefully, I'm talking to, you know, uh, those who are representing districts, right, who can actually get this information and be more deliberate about holding individuals or uh, companies, organizations accountable so that the poverty pimping isn't happening, right? The other element is financially related, financial control. What's funny is when I pinpointed these different elements, I actually was looking into the profile of a pimp, like a pimp, right? To get a better understanding of what happens with poverty pimps. So pimps are known for control and manipulation in general, right? That's how they operate. They control, they manipulate, they exploit, they try to make you financially dependent. That's the financial control piece. And they use intimidation, right? Intimidation factors, sometimes relating um, violence, right? Involving violence. And so this isn't anything new, to humanity. Like this is how the dark world, the underbelly is, right? And we can't ignore the underbelly. So that's why I'm sharing it, I'm exposing it, calling it out. But this other element of financial control is that piece where the community starts to feel like they are dependent upon an individual, a group of individuals, an entity to get things done, as opposed to being very clear and holding organizations accountable for what they are doing in the community and how the work is getting done. So you can actually applaud the organizations that are doing well and that are being clear and transparent about the impact, right? What's actually happening. They're being transparent about their struggles, their barriers, where they can actually say, "Hey, we're having a hard time getting people to participate in this program, and it's these dollars are allocated for this, and we need some help. So we're out here, we're at this event, we're on the airwaves, we're talking to people to try to get more people to participate because the funding's here for this. And if we don't fill all of these seats, or we don't have the participants, we're going to have to send this money back." That's what you do. That's what you do when you are filled with purpose and integrity, and you know that you need to do right by the people, right? You need to do right by the people that have funded the initiatives, do right by the people who deserve the funding that has been allocated for said purpose, right? Like those are the things that are clear when you have people who get it. And when you have people who don't or don't care, then it's also clear what their goals are. It's full of control and manipulation. It's full of exploitation. It's full of financial control. It's full of intimidation, scare tactics, um, sometimes even violence, right? So that piece has to be clear. And another element that I think I would like to kind of wrap up on is optics, right? Optical illusions, if you will. I think I'll say that term and and use that to explain what I'm saying. There are, and what I like to call smoke and mirrors is the way that I think this plays out. And I talked about it a little bit. I alluded to it earlier with some of the other elements, but when you have individuals or organizations that are set on appearances, right? They want to look as if they are doing a thing. They want to sound as if they are doing a thing. Then they specialize in trying to make the public believe that whatever they're saying is true. Whatever they've done, they've done. Well, there's an easy way to track these things, to really call out optical illusions and auditory illusions, is by tracking dollars, tracking the money, right? Like that is a layer that I think most people aren't willing to explore or ask for even, or even think they have the ability to do so. But that is where you can get to the truth of the matter. What's actually happening? How much, if we look at the big picture, how much, and we should be looking at the big picture, right? If we really are trying to solve these problems collectively and not in this piecemeal form, Matt, we would be looking at, well, how much has a city and its people put into solving this particular issue? How much has gone into trying to solve homelessness? How much has gone into trying to solve um, academic delays and academic gaps? How much has gone into trying to solve uh, creating security and safe places for youth? How much has gone into trying to solve um, decreasing recidivism and actually giving purpose and place to citizens after they have been justice involved, right? Like how much has gone into trying to create jobs that lead to living wages for families, and then actually seeing the deliverables. What was the result of what went into what was invested into these initiatives? That should be the way that we are looking at these things, right? Because otherwise, people can say whatever they want to say. The people who want the money will get the money, keep getting the money, and keep making you believe that something happened with that money that didn't even happen. That's theft. Like, that is delusional, right? For us to continue to fund initiatives that are not even beneficial for the community. And then everybody's applauding and well, why? Why? Nothing's really been accomplished that we set out to say we were going to accomplish. So this is why it's important to be on your P's and Q's if you're in any space where this is your problem. I don't know why I was sent to this earth with caring about these things, but I was. And that's part of my calling. If it is yours, I ask you to tune in, to start asking questions, to dial it up, to ask your people to start asking questions. And if you're not somebody who cares, like you like, yeah, it's whatever. If it happens, it happens, and if it didn't, it didn't. I don't care. Then I'm not speaking to you. But maybe you know somebody who does care, and maybe if you're one who doesn't care, you'll get down the road, and soon you will be forced to care, right? Because it's going to hit you at some point, right? Even if you are not the one who is the direct uh, beneficiary of this kind of treatment, you may know someone who is, that will impact your world soon. That's why we all should care. The level of how much you care, that's up to you. But we all should care. Apathy is not a choice. So I'll close out there. Join me next time. I hope it's soon. I know we've had a little gap in sharing this episode, but hopefully we can get the next episode out within the next couple of weeks, and we will be talking about wimps. So we've hit bullies, we've hit poverty pimps. We're going back to the wimps. So bullies, wimps, and poverty pimps coming for all of y'all. And I will say that it is very important to me, and I hope it's important to you. Be bold, be courageous, be unpimped. Till next time.